You know, I guess it's fitting that this chapter is titled Lost. Because I really am right now. Lost. Let the lever pull you to your feet and hold you close. Dancing even when fear urges you to sit this one out. In some ways, experiencing the deep peace of being awake to what you are, and then losing connection with this awareness, feeling unable to wake up instantly, can be more painful than when you are unconscious. The feeling in my body when I slip away from being present, when I fall out of my awareness of being into doing, reminds me of dreams I had when my children were very young. In my exhaustion and my anxiety about being an adequate mother, I would dream that I had forgotten one of my sons in a store or another public place. Terrified that he would be harmed, I would tell myself it's only a dream, it's not real, just wake up. And I would open my eyes and find myself in my bed, my heart pounding in my ears, but no sooner had I started to calm down when some bizarre incident, like a creeping paralysis in my limbs as I tried to go to a screaming son being carried from the house by a marauder, an intruder, would let me know that I was still sleeping and dreaming, and I would once again struggle to wake up. Some nights, this exhaustion and desperate bid to wake up would repeat over and over again. Sometimes, this is what it's like to live for even a moment in the center of your awareness of what you are, and then lose this awareness. You know you're asleep, but you just can't wake up. We have become wholly identified with passing thoughts and feelings, usually strong and often painful thoughts and feelings that seem to overwhelm and define who we are in the moment. We cannot find our ability to sit within the still center of simply being. In these moments, we feel that the still center is an accessible fantasy. We become certain that we simply can't get there from here. We may not even want to be present in these moments. May feel like we want out of our own skin. But if we had had an experience of our essential nature, of sitting in the now fully, we may remember that this too shall pass, and may be able to observe how this loss of consciousness happens. I cringe a little to tell my stories of failing to stay awake. Our wounds and our fears are more common than unique, more humbling than enlightening or entertaining. Your stories of fear overwhelming your awareness of all that you are will be difficult in the details, but the same in their essence. I share these stories because I want to know, and I share how it is when a woman who knows what she is, who has experienced her inner essence in the deep peace of this presence brings. I can lose this sense completely and then find her way back. Can lose her sense completely and find her way back to it again and again, because this is what it's sometimes like to be human. To be awake so you cannot imagine ever going back to sleep again, and then to be lost in a nightmare from which you feel you simply cannot awaken. I'm interested in finding ways to alleviate suffering in myself and in the world, so the stories of how we discover a way out of the darkness of separation and suffering interest me as much as the stories of grace-given peace. I'm unpacking boxes of files and books in my new office and writing studio. It's late. I cannot see out into the blackness beyond the windows, but I can hear the wind blowing in the deep snow into high peak drifts around our new home. A recording, a gift from the staff at the Sounds of True Audio I received months ago entitled The Scent of Light, plays on a CD player that has finally been unpacked and hooked up in the corner. Accompanied by a plaintive wail of the Cesar, a man's voice slowly recites the ecstatically inspired poem of Hafiz, the 14th century Sufi mystic, as they have been translated by Daniel Ladinsky. But the words roll off of me like raindrops hitting a canvas. They do not penetrate my gloom. I'm tired, moving mechanically after too many days of planning and packing and painting. My back aches from lifting boxes, and I have no strength in my arm for overextending my elbow at some point on the process of moving. Only 4 months ago, I had had whole days of acting from deep stillness, but the last 4 weeks have been a blur of frantic doing. concerned about moving a household and a business when all I really want to do is write. Pressured by the seemingly endless details of moving right after our wedding celebration and in the midst of Christmas holiday preparations, I have lost all sense of not doing. All of my movements have turned into a relentless quest to have everything settled in the new home so I can resume writing by the first week of January. Focus on this goal and fueled by my anxiety that it will not be accomplished. I move through tasks with undaunted perseverance, but little joy, pushing and prodding and dragging the men I love, my 2 sons, and Jeff, along with me, pressing them to work steadily from early morning until we all drop exhausted into our beds late at night. The thing that is so discouraging is that I have been able to see it happening. I've never really lost sight of what I was doing. I've remained conscious enough to see myself frantically running and yet still been unable or unwilling, I cannot tell which, to stop. I failed this test. I saw before me only 6 weeks earlier. I did not trust my deep inner stillness to guide me in getting done what was needed, and so I took over with all my ego strength and pushed through. In doing so, I know I've lost access to the wisdom that might have guided me in knowing what really does need to be done and what could have waited or be let go. When I'm caught in critical driveness, only perfection will do. All tasks appear critical, and the failure to meet an anxiety-ridden and ever-rising expectations promises unspecified disaster. How can I write about heeding the call to stop doing? To simply be and let all movement come from the place of stillness when I'm so caught up in doing? Is not doing possible only if we have no deadlines, no obligations, and we're feeling calm and centered? If so, it's not much good in human life. But the truth is, I had a choice. I could see what was happening, and I chose doing, and I chose to keep going. Somewhere deep inside, I told myself I would go back to not doing, back to cultivating my awareness and my inner stillness once the boxes were unpacked. After all the painting was complete and the tasks were caught up. I know this is crazy. The tasks around a home are never finished, and a spiritual practice that cannot be maintained in the midst of life, particularly when things are stressful, is not useful for connecting with ourselves, or that which is larger than ourselves. I'm overwhelmed by feelings of failure, by my sense of having betrayed the sacred mystery, that which has given me an exquisite taste of my essential nature, but still knowing that I need to stop. But still feeling frozen in the misery, I continue to unpack boxes, sure, in some dark corner of my heart, that I will be deservedly abandoned by the beloved that calls my name for not heeding the call, for seeing what is needed and simply not having whatever it takes to stop. I accept my failure with a kind of dismal stoicism, muttering bleakly and repeatedly to myself as I empty and flatten another box. You're not handling this well. Suddenly I'm aware of the words to the poem that is being spoken by the CD player. Unexpectedly, they stop me where I stand. I listen, and I feel an unforeseen thawing of my body and heart that allows me to feel in places where I've had only a sense of being frozen and numb. I go down on my knees there in the middle of packing materials and boxes. Something inside sends and tears begin to flow as Hafiza's words touch me greatly, splitting me open. You have not danced so badly, my dear. Trying to hold hands with the beautiful one. You have waltzed with great style, my sweet crushed angel. To have even hurt God's heart at all. Our partner is notoriously hard to follow, and even his best musicians are not always easy to hear. So what if the music has stopped for a while? So what if the price of admission to the divine is out of reach tonight? So what, my sweetheart, if you lack the ante to gamble for real love? The ante to gamble for real love. The mind and the body are famous for holding the heart ransom. But Hafiz knows the beloved's eternal habits. Have patience, or he will not be able to resist your longings and charms for long. You have not danced so badly, my dear, trying to kiss the magnificent one. You have actually waltzed with tremendous style, my sweet. Oh, my sweet crushed angel. One of the difficulties of knowing what you are and why you're here, and then losing and regaining that awareness, is a temptation to identify with feelings of shame for failing to hold close to you what you know. But never in all my experiences of the presence that I am, or that greater mystery in which I participate, have I ever even caught a glimpse of judgment or recrimination. Shame only makes it harder to be with what is. Pulling away from what is, even when what is being disconnected from the experience of our essence, is continuing the war with reality. We cannot end this war by doing, but only following our longing and letting it lead us back into simply being. I have great faith in our longing as a portal that can take us to what we are if we follow it down into the deepest ache of the soul. But longing, the ache for something more than just continuing, is not the same as craving. Craving is fueled by fear and pushes for speed and doing, whereas longing wants to linger within, go deeper into and learn from what it is in the present moment. Craving is never really satisfied, is always reaching for more, looking for some other time and place to the idealized past or hope for future satisfaction. Craving most particular form of what we want. A particular relationship, a specific job, a certain kind of home, or some other possession, even spiritual fulfillment. Longing will take us to the knowledge of our essence and the meaning unfolded in being what we are. Longing and craving can at least initially look alike, but they lead down very different roads. Sometimes when the heat of my battle with reality is at its height, when I am certain that my very existence depends upon changing what I see as unjust or simply wrong, whether an attitude or feeling within myself or circumstance in the world. When I'm caught in craving, attached to the outcome of my actions and disconnected from my deeper longing, I mistake the call, the tug that pulls at my weary heart, for an admonishment to fight more fiercely and to try harder. And I become not called but driven, filled with what may look like to others, like the passage of sincere conviction. I resolve to do whatever I imagine it will take, to follow the longing impeccably, to live what matters consistently, and to allow the complete unfolding of who I am so well, so perfectly, that I will transform aspects of my personality, will be forever changed into a kinder, gentler Oriah. When we are driven, we don't want to end the war. We want to win it. I wish I could tell you that the minute I was broken open by the words of Hafiz's poem, I stopped doing and sat in the center of my essential stillness. But as Hafiz wrote, some nights you simply don't have the price of admission to touch the divine. What a challenge for this perfectionist. To face that at moments I simply cannot find what it takes to be consciously aware. All my life I have warred with this reality, pressing myself to pull more resources from a deeper place. Try harder, do better, and Hafiz says, so what if you can't do it right now? Relax. This is not a giving up, but a giving over to what is true in the present moment. And in the moment, I accept what is. Something begins to shift within me. Over the next few days, I begin to sit, not with the still center of my essence, but with my anxiety, my fear for being abandoned by the beloved, because I could not maintain my awareness of who I am and why I'm here. And as I do so, my longing to stop and simply be Your longing of feet assures me the beloved cannot resist for long, grows larger than my fear of not getting things done on time. If we can see our doing, if we are conscious of moving when we need to sit still, aware that we have fallen from following the flow into relentlessly pushing river and yet continue to do, usually we will find we are fighting something in the current reality, something we are trying to overcome or outrun, something we are hoping will change before we have to look it directly in the face. The good news is that one moment of conscious stopping will often lead to another, and then another. I keep working, but I slow down a little and watch myself, and I become aware of a level of turmoil within that surpasses my fear, that the unpacking will not be done in time for me to resume writing in January. There is a shakiness, a kind of confusion, a strange mix of feelings of bewilderness and grief in the center of my body and heart. There is an emptiness I do not understand. It takes a few days, but eventually I sit with and begin to understand what has been familiar and frightening. I'm reminded of all the change that has happened in my life over the last 3 years. All that I identified as myself, the roles I've played in my home and my community. My primary relationships and the nature of my work has changed. If I were writing about a woman based on my own life 3 years ago, she would be a single mother of 2 teenage sons living in specialized housing. She would live in the center of a large city inundated by the noise of streetcars and close neighbors playing pianos, stereos, and saxophones too late at night, and the sound of trucks backing up, construction workers shouting, and dogs barking too early in the morning. She would be frugal, careful with money, accustomed to having very little, but comfortable with making do. Unexpected expenses like a punctured radiator in her 12-year-old car would require creative thinking and fortuitous blessings, like scrapyard finds and unexpected gifts. Her work involves counseling individuals and sharing the spiritual teachings and practices she has learned over 15 years with small groups and workshops, evening classes, and week-long retreats. She has built and maintains an intimate community primarily of women, and including few close friends, by helping people to connect to themselves and each other in the context of shared ceremony, self-examination, and prayer. Between the daily mothering of 2 sons, giving to and receiving support and assistance from friends, and maintaining the community of students who study with her. Her life is full of people and responsibilities and the daily drama these bring. If I were writing a story based on my life today, the woman would look very different. She would be married and living with her husband in a modest but beautiful home in the country, surrounded by deep silence and a dark forest. Deer come to drink at the pond outside her door, and the echo of the coyote's howl is the only sound that breaks the night stillness. Her sons, young men in their early 20s, visit occasionally on the weekends when their studies and their jobs in the city 2 hours away allow them to make the trip. Her work is solitary, writing alone in the quiet of her home and traveling occasionally to speak with crowds of friendly strangers in groups as large as 2,000. Her books are selling. The invitations to speak continues. Her husband is employed, so even with 2 sons in university, there is enough money so that unexpected expenses do not cause lost sleep or necessitate material sacrifices. She is new to the area where she is living, so she knows no one. She has no tight-knit community with whom she shares a history. Most of the locals are farmers. Many devoted Mennonites who have lived in the area for generations. Her life intersects with theirs primarily around tasks like snow removal or wood delivery, and there are few opportunities to get to know these polite, friendly people. I know what you're thinking. What's the problem? The changes are good. The surprise which leaves a strange hollow feeling in the center of my body is that I was, and still am to some degree, identified with the woman in the first story. That's who I was for over 16 years, and all that is gone. The new is wonderful, but it is new. I have not yet identified with the married woman living quietly and comfortably close to the land. It doesn't feel like me. As I realize this, I'm shocked to see how much of what I do is determined by a set of beliefs I have about what is required in certain roles. My beliefs may not correspond to the ones held by the mainstream culture. In fact, in some instances have probably been shaped by a deliberate, if somewhat unconscious, desire to reject mainstream cultural experiences. They still offer a kind of conceptual prepackaging of life. I know how to live as the woman on her own, how to do the daily mothering of sons, how to live on very little without feeling deprived, how to cope with the challenges of noise and pollution and the fast-paced life of the city. I know what it means to be the teacher in and the leader of a small community of people committed to exploring their inner life. The temptation, of course, is to identify with the new roles as quickly as possible and establish the package of reactions and responsibilities I think go with these roles. What does it mean to be a wife? Do I acquiesce gracefully to the role of homemaker, cleaning up after another adult for the first time in 16 years? Or do I decide on principle that Jeff must clean the toilet half the time, whether it looks dirty to him or not? Given the incredible need of so many in the world, should I give away any income I do not need to cover immediate necessities? Or would saving be the prudent and responsible thing for a woman approaching 50 in uncertain economic times? Or would this reflect and exacerbate a basic lack of trust and an inability to live in the present? How much assistance should I give my sons? How often should I call them or ask them to come and visit? When I'm trying to be overly involved in their lives and when I'm simply offering the support they need and deserve. Questions about how to use our time and energy and resources, how to structure our relationships with our partner. The families and communities are the ones we deal with, but most of the time we deal with them by creating a story for ourselves and in our thoughts and feelings about the role we play in these stories. Identifying with these stories, we unconsciously allow them to shape our decisions, to determine which of our constantly changing thoughts and feelings to act upon. It enables us to go on automatic pilot and gives us a sense, the illusion of knowing who we are, of understanding ourselves. It allows us to go to sleep. The problem is not the stories we tell, but our unconscious and often exclusive identification with these stories and the roles we assign ourselves within them. I'm in between stories. The old one is gone, and the new one is just beginning to take shape. When we already have a story we are heavily identified with, whether we appear to like the story or not, it is difficult to stay awake, to watch our thoughts and feelings without letting them dictate our actions. A clear story about who we are makes it hard to wait and let our actions arise from the deep and open emptiness of experiencing who we are right now. It makes it difficult to allow actions to arise that may be inconsistent with how our story says we should move. This time, in between stories is happening for me just as menopause, another change, another gap in the story of who I am begins to affect my physical, emotional, and mental sense of self. And I ask myself, who am I now that I'm not the leader or teacher of a small community? Who am I now that my days are not dictated by the demands and challenges or buoyed up by the rewards of daily mothering? Who am I now that I do not have to come to terms, as I did sometimes gracefully and at other times with inelegant self-pity, with having a few financial resources, with living in a large city, with meeting the challenges of being alone? And I find in this time of change that all the things I took to be me All the roles and reactions and responsibilities and conditions I identified as myself reveal no self at all. This convergence of so identi- This convergence of so much change in a relatively short period of time shows me that these roles and their corresponding thoughts and feelings always were perpetually changing, even as some I, that is beyond or behind them, all remains constant. This in between time is not trial to be endured, although at times I admit I have found it difficult to simply stay in no story, with no story and no self. Shit. This emptiness at the center is not a bewildering loss to be outrun. This gap in my story allows me to see how I am not what I do, allows me to create and play with new stories, with new roles, without identifying exclusively to them. Who would you be if you did not do whatever you do every day? What if you experimented in ways that could do no harm to yourself or others? Were soft where you normally are hard, and tender where you usually feel. You must draw a firm line, giving where you usually take, receiving where you should have no expectation or habit of receiving. What if you played with the solid sense of self you have built up, said what you were thinking when you usually remained silent, were quiet where you always felt you needed to add something? How much of the story you have created do you mistake for who and what you really are? Do you believe it liberates you from daily decision making to focus on other things? How much does it confine you, dictate which thoughts and feelings you follow into doing? Create a gap in your story and sit within the gap. Sit in the emptiness of not knowing who or what you are until an awareness of your essential nature fills you. We think the call, that which beckons us away from identifying exclusively with these stories we create, comes and goes. But the truth is, it is always there. It is the very ground of existence. What comes and goes is our ability to hear it, our willingness to let go of what we think we are so we can open ourselves to hearing that which calls us back to what we always have been. When we open to this constant call, we remember why we are here and allow this knowledge to create a new and fluid story colored with that knowledge and never mistaken for all of who we are. Going back to sleep, exclusively identifying who we are by the story we and our culture have co-created, and being unable to wake up to full awareness of who we are and why we are here, can be painful, but we can learn a great deal from the moments when we lose the thread of awareness, can gain knowledge about how to alleviate suffering in ourselves and the world in our bid to find our way back home. Our failures open us to truly receiving the grace that gives the existence so that we can hear the voice of the beloved that calls, as Rumi wrote, saying, "Come, come again and still again, even if thou hast broken thy 1,000 times." Most of the time, we're not even aware of the story we're allowing to define and shape our choices. Sometimes it helps see ourselves from a distance to consider ourselves in the third person if we want to see the set of assumptions we are allowing to shape our daily view of reality over and over again. Again, in this meditation, we are simply seeking a greater level of consciousness about what is. We do not need to judge what we discover. We are not required to do anything with the information we gain except to be with it. Sit in a comfortable position. If you find writing helps the flow of creative imagination, make sure a pen and paper are nearby. Take 3 deep breaths, filling your body with oxygen and exhaling all tiredness or tension in your body. Let go of all expectations of what is to come. Breathing them out with the exhale, let the weight of your body drop down. Let your mind follow your breath, gently bringing it back to the movement of air in and out of your body when thoughts and feelings come. Imagine you're writing a screenplay or a novel based on your own life as it is right now. How would you describe the character of this story? Just start the sentence. He is, or she is, over and over again and see what comes. How does it change what you start with? He is the man who. She is the woman who. Repeat the phrase and see what comes, writing each one down and moving on to the next. Putting down the pen and paper, bring your attention back to your breath. Once again, take 3 deep breaths, inhaling deeply and exhaling completely. Sit for a few moments, focusing on your breath. Then, pick up the sheet of paper and read what you have written, as if it were written about someone else. As you read each piece of description, ask yourself what assumptions you would make about such a person. For instance, I might describe myself as someone whose work is solitary, completing the phrase. As her work is solitary. What assumptions do I have about people who work in solitude? That they are quiet, introverted, and creative, perhaps even a little eccentric? As I move through the statements, I can see how my assumptions create a story about my life, a solid identity of situation, roles, and feelings that are fluid and changing. Seeing these assumptions cluster around the roles in your life, consider where they shape how you behave, how you present yourself to the world. What do my assumptions about what it means to work in solitude mean for me when I'm feeling extroverted, noisy, or uncreative? Can I leave room for feelings and behaviors that do not fit the story I'm creating in my mind about who I am and what I want to do? Can I participate in the story consciously when I choose to, but not let it dictate my choices? This is a messy process. If it feels confusing, slow down. Sit with the pieces of the story you tell yourself about your life and wait for the unconscious assumptions to surface. Be aware of the thoughts and feelings you have about these assumptions, neither pulling away from them nor enthusiastically declaring them to be the truth. Just be with what is and breathe. Your world is next. Oh, Ashlyn keeps us up. They're laughing and cutting up. Thanks for coming. I'm gonna go say good morning.